Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad that you could be here. Today, we're talking about how you could get a lot more done and spend a lot less time doing it. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about a lot of cool things that help you grow your business, including being more courageous, doing more with less, and managing your time, not focusing on things you shouldn't be focused on. There's so many mistakes that business owners make. And so what I did was call in one of the leading business coaches to help teach us how to stay on the straight and narrow and how to really run a highly profitable business that doesn't consume massive amounts of our time and our joy. So with us today is David Wood. Now, after life as a consulting actuary for a Fortune 100 companies, David built the world's largest coaching business, becoming #1 on Google for life coaching. Now, since discovering that shiny object syndrome is an epidemic amongst high performers, David's coaches rockstar business owners to double revenue, achieve more in less time, and be more extraordinary entrepreneurs, parents, and partners and leaders as well. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ty. And I think you nailed it in that introduction. I care about money because more money is better than less money. It makes everything easier. So yeah, let's double revenue. But that doesn't really help you a lot if you're spending, 40, 60, 70 hour weeks. You might want to work a 10-hour week and double revenue. And that's absolutely possible. So let's do that. And along the way, how are we showing up as humans on this planet? How are you showing up for your partner or for your friends or for your kids or for yourself? Because I want, when that time comes that you're lying on your deathbed, that you can look back and say, I gave it everything. I really was the best I could be at life, not just at business and making money.
I love that. I got one of the coolest messages I've ever received on Facebook Messenger the other day. And the guy had said, hey, look, I've run a business and run hard this whole time. And I see all these pictures of you on Facebook with your kids. And it's helped me kind of decide that I'm off now, work at 5, and I'm doing these priorities. But it's interesting because I did that, David, because I learned very early on that you've got to set your goals of what you want to accomplish, but you have to set your boundaries of what you're willing to sacrifice or give to reach those goals. Is that the first step? What's the first step of being able to get where we want to be, but creating boundaries or rules for ourselves that we're still present with our kids or wherever our priorities may be?
Yeah, well, I think step one is to really get clear on our goals. I know it sounds really basic, but a lot of people haven't written down goals that would have them do the happy dance in 12 months. So, I just see my dog's
I
come
see
in.
that. It looked like my dog too. It was either a ghost or a dog.
I know, it'll say a ghost has come in. She's come in to let me know that my personal assistant has arrived. Go and let her in, Bella. First step is to work out the goals. So what would have you do the happy dance in 12 months? And it only takes 5 minutes to sit down and work out that question. It might be doubling revenue. It might be getting closer with your kids, 50% closer, or building trust. It might be finding a partner. It might be having your partner 50% happier in the relationship, but work out where you're going. If you don't know that, how are you going to know what to say no to? Which is the second bit. So you work out, these are my goals. Pick the top 3 because the rest are just going to scatter you and have you stressed. And you put the rest in a drawer. And you pull out the rest once you've knocked off something on the list. Then you pull out the next one. So you got your top 3 goals. And then what are you going to say no to? That's the next step. I'm going to close that door. I've never had so many interruptions in a podcast in my life, but that's part of life. And so what are you going to say no to? If you try and do everything, you're going to be bad at most of it. If I screwed up 5 balls of paper and threw them at you and said, catch, you'd be lucky to catch one of them. So we have to have a list of what's important. And then here's what I agree not to do. For example, I want to build alliances. I'm really good at it. But if I try and do a bunch of podcast interviews and Facebook ads and all the other things that I'm trying to do in my life, I'm going to drop balls. So I've made an agreement with myself. I will not pursue alliances until 2022. You got to have a list of what not to do. And then the next step I recommend is you layer those goals, because a month out is almost meaningless. It's pie in the sky. How do you relate that to today? It's too hard. So just bring it back. All right, 3 months from now, what would have me do the happy dance for those three goals? Here are my targets 3 months from now. And then every week, we've got to have the 7-day version. I've got it on my board. I've got a vision board up here, and I've got the 7-day column. That's what I've chosen to care about for 7 days. And then I've got all this other stuff that I want to do, but it's not allowed to get into that 7-day column yet, because I'll get stressed and freaked out, and I just can't handle it all. Now, if you pause the recording and you go and set your 12-month goals, your 3-month goals, and your 7-day goals, you'll be set for 7 days. But what happens then? You'll be lost again. So this is so simple. And by the way, listeners, I've got all of this on a cheat sheet. It's a checklist that you go through, and we'll give you this at the end of this episode so you don't have to write it all down. You need to have a CEO date with yourself once a week. 20 minutes. That's all I'm saying. 4 o'clock on a Friday, 9 o'clock on a Monday, 4 o'clock on a Sunday, whatever you choose. And this is where you look back at what you've accomplished. You celebrate, do the happy dance, literally pat yourself on the back for what you did, because you've probably done 10 times more than you think you did. And then choose from your 3-month targets what you're going to knock off for the next 7 days, and put it up on your board or in Trello, wherever it goes. Do that every week. It's a game changer. And the reason I want you to do that, because that'll tell you what to say no to. When you get an email and you look at your 7-day board, I want you to have the discipline to say, hey, I can't get to that until next week. Or maybe you've got a section where you give yourself like an hour a day to do email, and you'll do it then. But so much stuff is going to come in and want your attention. It's going to pull at you. That's where we get scattered, and that reduces revenue, and that reduces time off. So I want you to have focus so that you can actually work on what matters. Now, there are a bunch of other steps, but I think we've given a good 4 or 5 there that could get people started.
A lot of people do get distracted though. And we hear this as entrepreneurs as, shiny object syndrome. And I was reading your bio. We talked about that as well. How do you do that? Because I get what you're saying about put down what you're not going to do. But man, we are bombarded with stuff that comes out of the blue that we never even thought about adding to that list all the time. And a lot of it sounds pretty good, and we kind of get distracted. So what is shiny object syndrome? And I think you call it a freaking epidemic. So let's talk a little bit more about that as well.
I love that question. How do you stop being distracted? Well, we need to, if anyone's done any martial arts, you'll understand it requires some discipline. And if you haven't, you can still develop discipline. You might exercise each day. That requires discipline and habit. So we need the executive function of the brain. We need the CEO inside us to help us know what's a shiny object and what's not. So when you're setting those 12-month goals, you're exercising that executive function. This is the stuff that I want to do. This is the stuff I choose to focus on. The rest I choose not to do. Same at 3 months, same at 7 days. But let's get down to tomorrow. Even at 7 days, you're going to have to use the executive function and say, this is what I choose to do. These other things I really wish I could do, but they're not going to make it. I've got to make a hard decision. Then when it comes to tomorrow, a really great technique is set your alarm. You can tell Siri on your phone, or if you got an Android, you can say, set an alarm for 4 o'clock every day. Choose the 2 things that are most important for tomorrow. Really simple exercise, but you got to show up for that date with yourself. You got to take that 5 minutes or even 1 minute. Look at your board, your 7-day board, and say, all right, tomorrow, these are the 2 things that matter most. Then when you wake up, this is where the discipline comes in. Don't check your email. Don't check your voicemail. Your agenda will be hijacked by everybody else's agenda if you do that. set aside some time. I recommend, this is another element on the checklist that we'll give you guys. Book some sprints in your calendar. I like to have 2 hours minimum for a sprint. And that's a time when I will turn off my phone. I will turn off notifications on my computer. They're turned off by default. My computer is never allowed to ding me when there's an email. And WhatsApp, I mute it because I get started on something and then my agenda's hijacked by something. Put a sign on your door while you're doing a sprint. Let your family know, hey, I'm doing a sprint. Unless there's a fire or something really critical, please let me do this. It's really important. And when the sprint's done, I'll come out and I'll hug everybody and then make sure you do it. When the sprint's over, go out and hug everybody, say thank you. So you train yourself and everybody else for this time, I am focused. And then because you chose the two most important things the day before, you know what to work on. And because you didn't check email before you do the sprint and you didn't check voicemail, your brain isn't being pulled in 20 directions, and you could sit down, pull something off the board or from those two things you chose the day before, sit down and do it. Now, even if you get that far, this is like an obstacle course, isn't it, Ty? Even if you get that far, your own brain is going to want to pull you off track. Oh, I forgot to do those things on Amazon. I was in a sprint this morning and I thought about this author that I'd been wanting to interview. And I'm like, how come you haven't done that, David? And so I went aside from what I was doing and I pitched him. I sent a pitch to have him on my podcast. Now I'm willing to be pulled off course for important things like that I've been putting off. So no big deal. But a lot of things might be, I'm going to order something on Amazon, or I meant to call that person. Just write that down on a sheet of paper. That's your later list. So it's an obstacle course. And that's why I created the checklist for everybody. Maybe you try this for the first week and you get 2 or 3 of them checked off. And then you failed because people were knocking at your door, like me, right? I'm here focused with you. My personal assistant's knocking at the door. I messed up the time. I thought she was going to be here when I was around to tell her I'm busy. Please leave me alone. Didn't do that, so I failed, right, on the checklist. So I think, I don't want to overload people, because it's when clients start working with me, we go through it step by step. All right, start with these things, book your sprints. Now, one other thing I do want to say is even 2 hours is a bit much to ask a human brain to focus and to have a clear goal. So what I like to do is break it down into 25-minute sprints. And this is known as the Pomodoro method. So for 25 minutes, I've set my timer and I've got a very clear goal. Review my profit and loss. Next 25 minutes of the sprint, review half of the general ledger. Next 25 minutes, review the other half of the general ledger. And then the fourth 25 minutes, review my bookkeeper's notes and make notes for my bookkeeper. How clear is that? Then every 25 minutes, it is a sprint. I know I've only got 25 minutes. That time is going to go off. And if I don't get the first goal done, I'll be late for the second one. So it's a way you can actually gamify your work, and producing twice as much in half the time is really not that much of a stretch if you start applying these principles.
Choosing the right goals and right plans obviously is essential for what you're describing to work out. So why is that so important? How do we go about making sure we've got the right goals on our list of what we're going to do over the next 7 days or months or whatever it may be?
Well, if we're talking about 12 months, a man in my men's group, I have different sources of coaching and input, and one of them is a men's group. And his question that he posed to me is, David, what would have you celebrate your ass off? And I'd never been asked that. I've asked, what do you want? But that was confronting. It took me a week or two to sit with that. to come up with those goals. So I would pose that question to every listener. What would have you celebrate your ass off? Like you would literally be dancing and want to tell everyone, I'm so thrilled at what happened. Like, for example, for me right now, the owners want to move back into the house that I'm renting, and a nest is so important to me. So finding a home that's nurturing with a view and peace and quiet in the mountains, man, I can't think of much that'll make me happier than that. That's a worthy goal. Another goal for me, I've been dealing with anxiety and depression for 20 something years. No matter how spiritual I get, no matter how many practice I get, it's still shadows of it. So I'm working on that now. A goal for me is to just have peace in my body without relying on a beer in the evening, right? That's a goal that would make a massive difference to my life. And then business wise, I'm writing a book. It's called Name That Mouse, because the elephant is not the only animal in the room. And that'd be part of my legacy to the world. I'd be really happy to have that be out in the world and making a difference for people everywhere. So that's an example. Those didn't come overnight. I worked with my coaches to come up with that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And I'm interested in the how part of that as well, because a lot of what you're describing is changing in habits. To get away from shiny object syndrome, it's about creating priorities, creating goals, and then, having habits built in, whether it be daily or weekly, to go through and spend time to do these things. How do we do that? How do you go about changing habits to build these things in?
Yeah. Well, firstly, download the checklist that we're going to give you. It's very important because I've given out a lot of information on this call. It's very dense, the information I've given, and to expect you to just like take that in and then just do it, that's not going to happen. Maybe one thing, but if you download the checklist and ideally work with a coach, and I acknowledge I'm biased. I am a coach. I've been coaching for 20 years. And at one point, not so long ago, I had 5 different coaches for different areas of my life. So I'm a big fan of it. But if you try and implement long-term change alone, I find it very difficult. Very difficult. We're creatures of habit, incredibly so. And what most of us want is we want to create some change. We want to make more money. We want to have more time off. We want to be happier in the world. Well, that happens usually very slowly unless you have some kind of outside input. Could be a mastermind course, could be a group coaching program, could be one-on-one, could be a therapist. I'm a big fan of all of those things.
One of the things you talk a lot about is, speaking your truth. Why is that so hard? And why does it not come naturally to us? And how do we go about doing it?
Hmm. Well, one reason it's hard is because of fear of loss. If I speak my truth, I might lose something. And I'll give you an example right now in my life. There's a truth that I think I'm going to tell, and it's edgy for me. Um, one thing, I've been working on integrity for a long, long time, and I'm pretty good. My integrity's, more solid than the average bear, but it's still out of integrity in some areas. And one area is downloading pirated movies from the internet. The website, I want a movie, go and download it. And, I felt a bit off about it for quite some time, but it didn't seem like a big deal. And so I did it anyway. And then, recently I got a notice from the internet service provider saying, hey, you got to stop doing this or we'll cut it off. So I stopped. But the landlord got the same letter and she was very annoyed. She was very upset. Firstly, because she thought it was a bad thing to do. And she's right. I was in the wrong. But secondly, because it put her internet connection at risk. And I hadn't thought about that. And so I've since made amends. I've apologized to her and she's accepted my apology. And I went and deleted all of the movies off my hard drive. So I no longer have access to those. And I've committed to paying for every movie and TV show uh, that I'm not going to download movies anymore. But now I'm looking for a new house and they want a reference. And so, it's quite possible that they're going to get a reference from my current landlord and she might mention this. Now, it's very tempting to just not bring it up to the new landlord. But I'd rather they hear it from me than hear it from my current landlord. So I've decided I'm going to be upfront. I'm embarrassed about it, but I'll be upfront. Hey, this is what I did. I was in the wrong, and this is what I've done to make amends. And it might mean that I don't get the house. That's the fear of loss. Second fear is embarrassment, feeling embarrassed, feeling awkward, fear of being judged. So there are good reasons why people might not want to tell the truth. I understand that. But the other side of it is you got to look at the upside. Why would you tell the truth, given that it could be awkward and you might lose out on something? You might lose out on the job if you tell the prospective employer the truth. You might get fired from a job if you confess. You might have your partner really mad at you if you speak your truth and say something that you don't. Hey, I don't really like doing this in the bedroom. That might be a really awkward conversation. So I understand why we don't do it, but I think it's important to also present the upside. There's such upside to telling the truth. And the more I've done it, the more I've found that I get peace of mind. If I tell this new landlord about what I did, I don't have to worry about it biting me in the butt. I don't have to worry about them finding out through getting references. And if I don't get the house, okay, I'll be sad and disappointed, but maybe I'll find the house that is right for me. So peace of mind is a huge reason. Another reason is self-expression. We all want to be seen. We all want to be acknowledged and accepted and loved for who we are. And the more I hide that in my life, the less chance I have to be fully accepted and loved for who I am. Part of your subconscious is always thinking, yeah, but if they knew this, or if they knew that about me, I'd get in trouble, or they wouldn't like me. If you're willing to screw up your courage and tell the truth, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Take it on the chin. Take the consequences up front instead of constantly worrying, even subconsciously, about it. Now, Ty, I'm not saying you should do it 100% of the time. I used to think that when I was younger. Even if it's going to send me to jail, do it. And when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I did something that was illegal. And years later, I realized it was wrong. And I went and tracked down the person. I said, hey, I want to make a confession. That was me. I'm really sorry. How can I make it right with you? If they'd wanted to prosecute, I could have done jail time for it. Even if I was, even the fact that I was a kid, in some countries, you'd still be prosecuted. So I'm not saying you should tell the truth 100% of the time, even though I chose to in that case. I'd say, look at the upside, because your brain will often hide the upside from you. Look at the potential consequences and you choose if you're willing to risk those consequences. 9 out of 10 times in my experience, it's been worth it. Maybe 1 in 10 times you're like, hey, I don't want to go to jail, or I'm not willing to risk my partner divorcing me, or I'm not willing to lose the job, or to be kicked out of the country because I'm telling the truth about that I broke a law in the country. I understand and have compassion for people who make those decisions. I just think we make those decisions too often on the side of being cautious. So here's my invitation to everybody. Grab a piece of paper and a pen and write this question at the top. What would my life look like if I was 30% more truthful? That's all. Not 100%. Just if I was 30% more truthful, what would I say and to whom? And am I willing to risk those consequences? And that'll give you some really good homework.
What you're talking about takes a lot of courage. How do we do that? How do we become more courageous, more daring?
Wow. Huh, mate. So I just scanned my life and I just thought about last Friday. We're only at, I think what are we at? We're Tuesday now. So Friday. I'm doing a treatment program here in Boulder where they do therapy for anxiety and depression. But firstly, they inject you with an anesthetic. It's an experimental program, but they're getting amazing results. It's called ketamine treatment. And my first experience was beautiful. My second experience was terrifying. I had a reaction. I think I had a near panic attack while under the anesthetic. So my brain, I didn't even have all my faculties. I'm sitting there, the therapist is there. There's no machine hooked up to me, and my heart's pounding, and I'm worried that I'm having an allergic reaction. It was horrible. It was disorienting. And I'm like, am I going to die? And they're not even going to know about it. So that was an unpleasant experience. And I'm booked in for 6 sessions. So to your question, how do I find the courage to go back for session number 3, knowing that I might have I might have an allergic reaction or a panic attack or something like that. And I did a number of things. One is I talked to a lot of people about it, right? Talk to a coach is one thing that you can do. I talked to my therapist about it. I said, I'm not willing to go and have another session until we've spoken. I need help. I need support. I got to reframe this. Then I did some research. I looked at the studies. I got some information about it. I needed to know, is this a bad decision for my body? Or is this part of life? Is this part of what to expect? And what I decided in the end was, this is why I'm going to it. I'm willing to confront this. Also, we looked at what can I do to make it more comfortable next time. Therapists can hold my feet. Didn't know that. I can say, hey, slow down the infusion, stop the drip. Didn't know I could do that. So there are a whole bunch of things that I could do to tone it down if I need to. And I decided, David, this is a good move. I am willing to be afraid. And that would be the biggest piece of it. I'm willing to be afraid. I'm willing to have a panic attack, and I can deal with it. I've got the resources. And so where are we? We're at Tuesday. Yesterday, I went in and I had my 3rd session, and I was fully ready to be afraid. And Ty, the most amazing thing happened. I didn't get afraid. Maybe little shadows of it, but I was welcoming it. I'm like, okay, here it goes. I heard an ambulance siren in the first 10 minutes, started triggering something. I said, all right, let's welcome this. And then it just passed. And I had the most profound experience of my life yesterday, all because I was willing to be afraid. Now, I want to give a caveat to listeners. You don't have to do anything you're afraid of, mostly in life. You don't have to do it. I was at choice. I could have said, no, I'm going to stop the program now. But I went and got the resources I need, and got to the point where I was willing to ride my edge and go into it. And that's my invitation. If there's something you're afraid of, something you want to do in business, it might be asking a celebrity for an endorsement. It might be confronting an employee who's constantly late. It might be making a confession to somebody just to tell the truth. If you notice some fear around it, I hope some of the things I've mentioned today might give you some more courage to go into it and say, hey, I'm willing to be afraid anyway, because this is right for me and this is right for the world. And if you're not, if it's too scary for you, hey, most things you don't actually have to do. It'll likely be there when and if at some point in life you feel resourced enough to go and do it. Again, I come back to coaching. I think a coach or a therapist can help you find a way, find a framework so it's not so scary, just the way I was able to do it this week.
David, powerful stuff. Where can everybody go to learn more?
You can, I created a gift basket of goodies for your listeners. So I've got the checklist which is just 2 pages on how you can double your revenue and your time off. And I created a training because I have a business program called the Samurai Program, which is designed to have you double your revenue. Over 8 weeks, you get everything you need to double your revenue. And I created an assessment so you can work out which pieces of the program you need in your business and which pieces you don't. Because the plan for you, Ty, is going to be different for the plan for me. So you can get those things and a whole bunch more at myfocusgift.com, because I want to give you the gift of focus. So myfocusgift.com will take you straight there. And if you want to get more videos from me, you can get on my mailing list. You can also join my podcast, Extraordinary Focus. All of those things are all at the same link, myfocusgift.com.
David, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Ty.
So listen, there's a lot of cool things that we've covered today. I mean, from imposter syndrome to being able to have the courage to do the right things and to do the things that will really, take you forward in your life, both business and personal, as well as, tapping into really talking about your truth and knowing what to prioritize, what to do, what not to do. But again, we just kind of scratch the surface. So if you want to learn more, go to myfocusgift.com. That's myfocusgift.com. As David had said, he has a whole gift basket of goodies there, 100% free. All you have to do is go to myfocusgift.com. So go grab your gift basket of goodies at myfocusgift.com so you can then be on the track to double your revenue while focusing on less. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.